Hey, welcome back to Dad Space. It's Dave here with you yet again. Episode 170 of Dad Space. If you've been here for 170 episodes, you are my new best friend. If this is your first time here, we've been saving a seat just for you. I'm so glad you're here. This is the podcast for dads by dads. We bring on interesting dads and dad stories to help you. And we do solo episodes like this where we get into something that may or may not be related to where you're at, but hopefully we can learn something in the process, and I'm so glad you're here. If somebody shared this episode with you, they care about you, and they wanted you to know about this episode, so make sure you thank them, because those are your peeps, and we want to thank anyone for sharing this episode. We want to talk today about guilt tripping. I don't mean about falling down over your guilt, but this whole thing about guilt tripping within your family and the impacts that guilt trips have within a family dynamic. We want to talk about that here on the podcast. Now, this episode might be for you if you're the person who guilt trips others within your home and within your family, or if you're on the receiving end of guilt trips, wherever it comes from, but within the family unit, okay? Could be from your parents, your kids. It could be to your parents, to your kids. It could be within siblings. It could be within any dynamic within a family unit. That's what we're focused on here on the podcast. I'm interested if you've ever been on the receiving end of a guilt trip. I'm curious to get your feedback on what that feels like when somebody points their attention to you and guilt trips you. If you've never experienced this, then that's a good reason to stick around so that you understand and can help somebody else then, if you've never experienced this before. I'm anticipating that the majority of people that listen to this episode have some interaction with guilt tripping, even if it's only like back in your grade 6, grade 7 days, way back, when you experienced something like this on the schoolyard, at recess. There's probably something about this topic that's going to resonate with you, and I'd love for you to stick around, and we're going to go through a few things about guilt tripping. We're going to talk about understanding what it is, the impacts that it's going to have on your family, how to recognize guilt trip behaviors, how to break free from guilt tripping, and how to create some healthier family dynamics within your family unit as you are more aware of what guilt trips are, how they manifest, and how you can suppress and eliminate the behavior of guilt tripping. So stick around. Lots of stuff to cover. Glad you're here. Let's start off first. What the heck is guilt tripping? What is this phenomenon? And let's learn more about it. So first, understanding guilt tripping. Simply, guilt tripping is a form of emotional manipulation. Manipulation is obviously one person who has control over another. Manipulation can even be shown in an employer and an employee relationship. You have a job, you want to keep it, so you do what the job entails so you don't get fired. Technically, that is manipulation. That's influence. Guilt tripping is more of an emotional level. It's kind of below the surface a little bit, below the waterline. And it's where someone leverages feelings of guilt to control or influence another person's actions. And as we go through this, I'll have some links to the reference material that I'm using to create this episode. If you want to go deeper, articles, websites, they'll be included in the show notes. So on your phone, if you scroll up, keep going, you go down to the bottom of the page, you're going to see where you can actually access the articles that I'm looking at right now as I'm talking to you. So they're there for you. So again, guilt tripping, it's a form of emotional manipulation where someone uses leverage of using feelings of guilt to control or influence another person's behavior or actions. In family relationships, this can be particularly damaging and can really impact feelings of trust, can damage communication, and can really have a negative impact on the well-being of your family. Again, we're talking to two groups of people today, those impacted by guilt trips or those that are using guilt trips. So we're talking to both of you as you listen to this. The impact on family dynamics for guilt tripping, I have 4 dynamics to talk to you about. We'll kind of go through them together. Guilt tripping can have severe consequences on family relationships. Guilt tripping can really erode any feeling of trust within your family. A constant use of guilt and shame and communicated to somebody in a way that demeans the other person can really dull any form of respect and trust between family members. Someone who is kind of like a submarine, and now they can shoot off, weapons below the surface that no one sees, but completely damaging another ship below the waterline. I find that guilt tripping is like a submarine below the water, and a very subversive type tool, weapon that doesn't get a lot of attention. Again, goes below the surface of the water, hard to track, but deadly. And my caution to you as you listen to this, and if you use guilt and shame as a weapon within your family, what you're doing is navigating below the surface and picking off your target, and they have no real way to react or prepare. They're at the mercy of your attacks, really. Guilt tripping erodes any form of trust that's been established and just dismantles trust over time. Another impact of guilt tripping within your family dynamic is just the negative emotions associated with guilt tripping. Guilt tripping within your family dynamics creates negativity. It can lead to feelings of resentment, frustration, and even diminished self-esteem, specifically for the person that's being targeted by someone within your family. If you think about it, your family should be the one trusted place where everyone feels safe. And I feel that at times, families can become shattered. Families can go in different directions. Family members can be estranged, can pull away, move away, break away from the family unit that was once strong and is now, again, fractured and dislocated. This whole dynamic of having guilt trip as a leverage to get what you want out of people in your life can be very, very devastating for a family. Really, that resentment is strong. When you feel attacked, when you feel like you've been blasted from below the water surface and you had no time to prepare, it comes out of nowhere, and you are on the receiving end of someone's guilt trip, it's really going to lead to a lot of negativity, a lot of bad blood between family members. Another impact is the breakdown of communication that happens when guilt trips and shame are used as leverage. For communication to be effective, communication requires respect, requires listening, requires a lack of judgment. For effective communication to happen, both parties need to be receptive to each other. When one is attacking the other, communication breaks down. And when communication breaks down, things go silent. And when things go silent, people start adding to the silence their own opinions of what's happening. And this person doesn't care about me because they don't respond to my texts. Yet the texts and the communication that stopped the communication to begin with were really, really mean. And people don't know how to handle it. When communication breaks down in any form, at work, between partners, between children, anywhere in the world, when you stop communicating, that's when things get rough. When people are using guilt trips and shame as leverage to get what they want from you, it just destroys any type of receptive communication between people. And when communication is removed from a relationship, what replaces communication is manipulation and distress. Everything starts to fall apart when you take away communication from a relationship. Think about it. How is this manifested for you in your relationships? Past romantic relationships, friendships, work environment. The moment communication stops, things start to implode. So how good is your communication? And again, to the person that uses guilt and shame to get what you want out of people, do you understand what's happening behind the scenes? The fact that these people aren't reaching out to you anymore is because they feel judged. They feel like that they don't have the opportunity to talk to you. You only bark at them now, your list of demands, and there's no true loving communication. That bond's broken. And when you break communication, you're going to run into some problems. And the last part of the dynamics of understanding your guilt tripping goes to long-term effects. What happens when guilt tripping becomes a way of life? And I've never tried this before, and I don't know if you have, but apparently walking on eggshells is very hard to do. There's a whole thing. There's science there. And maybe someday I'll go grab some eggshells and take a walk. But when you're walking on eggshells, when you're trying to navigate life with people who are guilting and shaming you, it's really hard to have any meaningful relationship when somebody's treating you like it's a hostage situation. Children that are exposed to guilt tripping may develop trouble settling to healthy boundaries in future relationships and struggle with low self-esteem and even depression later on in life. Children who use guilt tripping and shame towards their parents when children grow up and become adults on their own. The idea that you can go from being a loving child to an angry adult and treat your family in a way that harms not just your family, but harms your relationship and harms you yourself. The impacts of this is just immeasurable. Your act of guilt tripping and casting shame on others is really going to reduce the recipient's self-esteem. It's going to create depression. It's going to create distance. And it's going to create a wedge between you and the target that you're shining this on. I found a clip on TikTok. TikTok always seems to offer me some amazing ideas for content to talk about here on the show. I'll put a link to the entirety of this creator so you can go follow. I did edit out a few of his words just because it doesn't fit with the format of my show, but I cleaned it up a little bit, but I wanted to include it for you because the insight pretty spot on to where I was going mentally in this episode. So again, I'll have a link. You can go watch it yourself, but I want to just share with you here so you could hear what he was saying. And we'll come back and chat about it in a second. But here's this creator on TikTok. Here's his thoughts around guilt tripping and kind of maybe a possible approach that you and I can think about when guilt tripping is coming towards us. Here's his thoughts.
I got asked recently, Sven, why does my family keep guilt tripping me and how do I get them to stop? And my answer is simple. It's ugly, but it's simple. And it's this. They keep guilt tripping you because they can. Because they trigger you and you keep responding. It's the same reason bullies can pick on the weakest in the herd. Why? Because they can. I'm not blaming the victim. I'm simply saying if you want to change a situation, you're not going to change them. You can only change your core beliefs that are saying, oh, I need to respond every time they make me feel yucky or make me feel bad about myself. I always have to respond. You change those core beliefs and change them to my feelings matter and how I feel is worth responding to, that I don't owe them to respond to their voice over my own voice. That's how everything changes. So when do you start?
So when do you start? I think we start now. I think we start now in our relationships to understand these voices, this tool, this leverage that's happening against us. I know, like, you're thinking, okay, well, who's this Dave guy to have a podcast for dads? And he must be some expert and he must have everything figured out. Well, no, not at all. Not by any means at all. I am just a dad trying to navigate life just like you. And as I find clips like that, I look at my own family and realize there's a lot of work to happen within my own family with my 3 kids. But I also can see the impact of things that come back towards me when I'm the target. And I just wanted to share with you that as a dad, if you ever experience guilt tripping coming to you from your own kids, how disheartening that can be, how sad that can be to know that you're a target of someone else's ire, as we would like to say. It's a very interesting dynamic when you're on the receiving end of this. And I just want to kind of point out some of the ways that guilt tripping behavior demonstrates itself, how it rises up, and maybe you can identify with one or all of these. But guilt tripping has some telltale signs that it's happening for you. And I just want to make you aware of it. So as dads, it's crucial to identify any guilt tripping behavior that's happening between you and your partner and you and your kids and you at work, your boss treating you, however. Here's some of the things that it might be indicators of guilt tripping happening for you. First is just silent treatment. It's just a form of emotional abuse used when demands are not met. It's the whole picking up your toys and leaving the sandbox if you don't get your way. It's childish. It has a good impact. It does send a message when you just cut off all ties and cut off all communication. It's very effective and very harmful as well. Silent treatment, when people bring up past mistakes and rub your face in it, using past errors or mistakes that you've made, and people bring that back to your attention and remind you, A, that they've never forgotten about that thing, or B, that you're just a terrible human being from time to time, which we all know we are. But when people bring up these reminders and rub us in that and make us come face to face again with something that we're not proud of, but they use it as leverage, that's not healthy behavior at all. And when people start highlighting their sacrifices, constantly reminding you of everything they've done for you, that's also a form of guilt tripping. When the person is a victim, using guilt trips to get what they want. You must help me because of ... Fill in the blanks. When somebody tells you that, hey, I've been sacrificing my life for you, I've been doing all these things, and you never come around, you never visit, it's guilt trips. It's what it is. Parents do it to kids quite often, especially as kids grow up and chase life and move out of the house and do their thing. Parents love using guilt trips to bring kids home again, to find identity. When your kids have moved on, be careful of using constant reminders of all that you've ever done for your kids as a form of shame or guilt to get what you want. And then the other part is emotional distancing, becoming so distant from your family, from your relationships, until you comply with their wishes. When somebody holds back relationship, when somebody holds back family, when somebody holds back their time, when somebody holds back anything, until you step up and give them their list of demands, that is guilt tripping. You need to be aware of that. And you need to know when you're being played. And you need to address it. So we know how to recognize it. We know what it is. We know how to recognize it. How do we break free from guilt tripping? Again, from being someone who uses guilt trips or someone who's receiving guilt trips. How do you break free from it? There are 5 things I want to share with you. First, recognize the patterns. Be aware of guilt tripping behaviors in your relationships. Have your radar out. Now that you're understanding better what a guilt trip is, be aware of it. Think about some of the ways that it shows up. Set some healthy boundaries. Establish clear limits on what you will and will not accept from the person who is guilt tripping you. Make sure that you have clear boundaries. Practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. Like we heard in the clip from the gentleman on TikTok. Be kind to yourself and understand that you're not responsible for someone else's emotions. That's not something you own. They own it. Try to open up some communication. Be honest, be respectful, and try to create dialogue within your family, especially if it's fractured. Be the one to initiate conversation. You might get guilt trips sent back to you. You might get shame sent back. Oh, finally, you respond to my text. You're going to get a little bit of that response. Some of that might be earned, like you have been silent for a long time. Some of it is not earned. And it's just that person reacting. What's important for you? A relationship with someone who's broken and fractured that relationship? Is that worth your effort? Try to open up a line of communication somehow. And then go get help. Like, don't hesitate to reach out to a therapist, a counselor for guidance. There are people who can help you in this. You are not alone. And the moment we feel like we're all alone, we get overwhelmed. And when we get overwhelmed, we stop. We just stop because we feel like we don't have all the answers. So I'm just going to stop right here and not try. There are people who help people like you and me every day to navigate this. So recognize the patterns, set healthy boundaries, practice self-compassion, be kind to yourself. Create some form of open communication. Open the lines of communication with someone who's been guilt tripping you, and then go get help. Go talk to somebody who's way smarter than me and get their insight. An outside point of view is always a healthy resource for you as a dad. What can we do to create healthier dynamics within our family? A few things to think about. As fathers, we play a crucial role in shaping our family's emotional environment. That tone, that feeling in your house, when people come over, they're like, wow, it feels so like homey here. That's not the sofa and the colors of the wall. That's the family dynamic that people are responding to. It's not a candle. It's you. It's not a cushion or a color palette. That's you. You set the tone for your home. When you address guilt tripping and shame and start promoting healthier interactions, you can create a more positive family dynamic. But first it starts with you. You, as dad, need to lead by example. You got to demonstrate healthy communication and sharing emotions and how you express things within your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your kids, your neighbors. Are you leading by example? Are you putting yourself out there? It's a good thing, too, for your kids, even when they're younger, to encourage independence and to support your children's growth by not using guilt as a tool to get what you want out of your kids, but support your kids' growth and them finding their own way in life and encourage that. We need to validate our emotions too and acknowledge that and respect that everyone's feelings are theirs and to not manipulate them to get what we want out of the relationship. No manipulation. We're here to validate. We're here to encourage it. We're here to see it grow. And foster open dialogue by creating a safe place for your family members to express themselves without fear of guilt or judgment. To the dads listening who are currently on the receiving end of guilt trips, I just want to talk to you for a second. You've never intended this to happen. You've never intended, you didn't wake up this morning and go, how can I mess up my family today? How can I break my relationship with my kids? How can I destroy this family unit that I love? You didn't wake up going, this human that I created with my partner years ago, what can I do to screw this up? That wasn't your intention. You didn't plan this. But something's happened where the communication has stopped. Maybe you're getting demands from your kids that you can't fulfill. Maybe you're working and you're doing your thing and your child is not participating. They're not actively doing something to make their situation better, but they blame you for where they are in life with no action on their part. You're working, you're doing your job, you're paying your bills, you're doing what you can to support your family. Your children aren't. And all they do is come to you and just ask for the next handout. There's been times where I would love to take my wife on a date, only to know that the money that I've given to my kids, they've used it to go on a date with their partner. I don't have the money to do anything with my wife because I gave the money to them to help them. They took that money and used it for something I would have used for my wife and my relationship. So I'm working, they're not, and I'm the one covering the costs. How is that fair? I got to tell you, when you're working a night shift and your wife's at home by herself and you're at work because you just got to make it work, and you know that the money you're giving to family is being squandered and used on things that do not make life better, you really get discouraged. You really stop wanting to help because, again, you're giving money to your kids and trying to support them, but they're using it in a way that's not helping. It's not making their situation better. And in that, you start feeling angry. You start feeling used. You start feeling like your efforts don't matter. And then the moment you start to pull back, because you're running out of finances, you're running out of resources to help them, then the silence happens, the emails happen, the angry texts happen, the holding back of relationship happens so that they can use it as leverage against you. And you watch your partner crying, you feel helpless, and you're like, do I just give in? Do I give them what they need so I can have a relationship, or do I hold strong and face this head on? That's the choice in front of you. What are you going to pick? Are you going to relent and give yourself to that person and fall victim to their guilt tripping and shame? Or are you going to stand up and tell them it's enough? The dynamics change over time. And if you're a young dad with a young family, to look at these kids around the kitchen table or playing at your feet in the living room and go, I never want that experience to happen. Well, I can tell you, that's how I felt. When my kids were little, I had no anticipation that this would ever happen. That I would be guilt-tripped into doing something, that I would feel hostage. I feel like that someone has me and I have to do what they say or else. That feeling is very scary. It's very harmful. And I know, as we've talked on this show many times, I only have so many days left on this planet. And the idea that this is wasted time is really hard to quantify. And every day goes by that things are broken, I realize it's another missed opportunity. So my encouragement for you and to myself, because I do listen to my own podcast, is to figure out ways that we can take steps towards repairing this inequity that's happening and remove guilt trips as a way to get things and address those that are abusing the honor and privilege of being part of this family. Take steps towards a solution. You're not only improving your own well-being in the process, but you're setting a positive example for your kids who may become parents of their own one day on how to contribute to a healthier, more loving family environment. Reach out and get some help. Like, there are people who can help you. And at best, find a peer, find another dad in your space where you can go grab a coffee, sit down and talk about this stuff, and get a perspective that's not yours. Someone from outside of your circle, someone who can speak life into you and maybe share their insight. Maybe somebody a little bit older than you. That's the whole idea for this podcast, is I just wanted it to be a spot where we can have conversations that could help you. And if you're not dealing with guilt trips, if this is not part of your family makeup at all, then count yourself in a great space. But I want you to be aware of it, because it can show up not just with your kids or with your partner. It can show up at work. It can show up with your friendships. It can show up in many different places. And don't let guilt tripping, don't let shame force you to do things against your will or against your ability that would tap you out, put you into debt, where you're just giving, no end in sight, and people start taking advantage of you. And you feel like you've lost control. My hope for you through the podcast and through conversations and through topics like this is that you will take a look in the mirror and see where you're at. And if somebody's guilt tripping you, it's time to make steps towards making that end. And I'd love to hear how you're responding to this. I'd love to hear how you're navigating this. And if you have a story about experiencing something like this, where someone's using guilt and shame to leverage you to act, to do things that you would love to do, but you just can't right now, I'd love to hear your story at dadspace.ca. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. More great episodes coming up. I'm going to be getting some authors on the show who write about dad stuff, so we can get you some new resources as well. Lots of great stuff coming up in the future. And if you, as a listener, you're still here, if you want to come on and talk about your dad's story, I'd love to have you on, whether it's your story as a dad or the story of your dad. And we can honor their story. I would love this to be a legacy piece for you, where you can put your voice into a podcast so your family has a record of your voice, talking about your experiences as a dad. What a great gift to give to your family. And I'd love to have you on the show to talk about your dad's story. So dadspace.ca, reach out anytime. I'd love to talk to you. Hey, thanks for listening to Dad Space. Thanks for hanging out to the end of the podcast. That's a great sign to wherever you're listening to this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, fill in the blank, that this was a good podcast to send people to. So simply by listening to this point of the podcast, you're helping the show grow. So good on you. Thanks for helping us grow Dad Space. If you want to help us fill our cups over at Dad Space, head over to dadspace.ca. Dadspace.ca, simple website, right? Dadspace.ca. You can fill up our coffee cup, which helps us then to keep moving forward with the podcast, and use our Buy Me a Coffee link over at dadspace.ca. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for coming back. And thank you for sharing, because the more dads we can help, the better. We're all here to help each other grow in community. That's what it's all about. And without you, podcast is pointless. There's no reason to do any of this. So you being here means everything. See you at dadspace.ca. Take care.